Greetings, ladies and managers, and welcome to this latest edition of Read Ethos, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Courage, written by Fulgidus. Mining is not the most exciting job in the cluster, or the best pay at the end of the year, but it's honest, mostly safe. It gives asylum and a chance at earning a salary to undesirables, and can be fun depending on the colleagues. We were mining hydrocarbons on an ice planetoid in a remote area of the galaxy, near the border with the Empire of the 12 Suns. Being humble laborers like ourselves, we didn't worry too much about our security. Those worries were handled by both a private conglomerate contracted by Mohole Inc., our company, and the Republic of Zon, outpost right behind the corner of our outpost, at a mere 0.2 lie. Our crew was composed of mostly omnivores and some herbivores, nothing too fancy. Good people, hard workers, honest folk. One of them was Jim, the human. Humans were a new species in the quadrant. The first crew had arrived just around 40.45 years ago, and Jim was the first employee to work with us. Jim was always happy, always joking about the hardships of his work, always mock complaining about everything and everyone, making the hours fly and the fatigue bearable. One fine Monday, we had just started the second shift when the alarm started. This code was actually new. It wasn't the fire alarm, the Titanic shift alarm, a water or chemical spill, or anything else they trained us for. So there were a couple minutes of doubt while the shift supervisor checked in with the direction center through the intercom. The alarm signified war/total lockdown. It meant that the outposts were facing a military force. It meant that we were soon to be under siege. During the next 2 weeks, we proceeded to seal every exit and every system that needed access to the outside, while the security team was doing their best to establish choke points and prepare weaponry near the vulnerable points and around the sleeping quarters, where some of the workers were already stockpiling rations and water. In the beginning, everything seemed so futile. No one was taking it seriously. Not a single shot had been heard or seen by the automated security systems outside, or the orbital satellites. The QNet said that there was intense fighting around the outpost in our facility, but apparently, this invasion force was small and more of a probe the Empire was using to test how much they could get away with before the whole Republic would react in an all-out war. It turns out that the Republic was ready to tolerate a lot before declaring war, and both sides were sending the minimum possible amount of troops and fleet to reinforce the lines in order to not risk leaving other parts of the border insufficiently protected. Everyone was working and joking as always, or trying to at least, just to a different end, securing the factory from this invisible menace. Everyone except Jim, he looked like he was done with humor. Before the attack, I only knew that he had a dog, Shiba Inu, named Genki. He liked the fermented alcoholic beverages, mostly malt, barley. He had a past he didn't talk about, which told me that he either was an ex-convict or veteran, which, to be fair to him, was rather common in the workforce. And, well, that was it. We had some shifts together, and we talked about sports, politics, and anything else on the QNet that at the time. But he never once took a position, never expressed an opinion worth noting. He always said something good about every side of the matter at hand, then a joke or some witty observation about an aspect of it, and he let someone else take it from there, remaining silent and listening for hours at a time, save for some more jokes and sporadic innocent pranks. Even the way he was grooming himself reflected a shift in mentality. Usually, Jim had a 5-day stubble, 30 hair. He dressed in the same outfit until it stank, then simply changed clothes after a good shower. Now, he looked like one of the security complement. Buzz cut, shaved twice a day, always dressed in safety gear the security complement asked us to wear while keeping it shiny and charged. The only time we saw the old Jim was when he brought his dog around the outer ring of the factory, playing with it, letting co-workers and guards pet it, running with it. That's where he still looked happy, warm. But those walks became few and far between. Then reality struck us harshly. The attack began. The QNet went down, the emergency call became unstable due to the quantum jamming that the attackers were deploying night and day. And the shelling, my gods, the shelling we endured. The shields we were using were just about the best available ones and dissipated about 99.97% of the energy ordnance thrown at us. But still, the vibrations in the hull were so severe that one had to eat standing up to avoid spilling the Nutri-Soup on the floor whenever that 0.03% came through. In a way, we were lucky. Apparently, the attacking force needed the extraction machinery intact enough to be used to supply their refineries. They didn't care to kill us all, true, but they didn't care if we died also. They just wanted those machines, and they would have killed everyone that was in between. After days of this ordeal, our shields fell. It was a strange feeling. After the near constant shelling, having enough silence to hear the breathing, the sound of water when you drink, the whining of Jim's dog was unsettling. When the silence fell, we were all in the living quarters, one of the areas of the base that still had atmosphere and life support. The director stood up, stretched in all of his height, and started to change clothes right then and there, putting on the best suit he kept for his very moment. A very expensive garment, custom-tailored to his taste and body, and started to slowly walk towards the external perimeter to go and deal safe passage out of the base, as per protocol. When he reached the door, he stopped, and for a moment he looked behind, to look at us, who were in miserable conditions. And at that moment, I saw the ghost of doubt flash behind his eyes for an instant, before he recollected himself and quickly strolled outside of the room. In retrospective, I think he knew there was no chance for it, but he had to try anyway. We sat there for what seemed like ages, then almost total silence, waiting to be ordered out of the invaders' way, waiting to go home, or at least to go where we could have some food and some decent sleep. While we were dreaming of real food and sleep, we saw our security jump to action, half of them running out of the room, weapons in hand, and the rest enabling and directing the defensive drones turrets they had in place since before the attack began. It turns out that since the Empire took too much time in capturing this little factory, because Molehole Inc. spent too much time in the security of the structure, the invaders now wanted to make an example of us. They wanted us to be the anecdote the other directors of the other factories and industrial outposts would use to justify lowering the shields and getting out of the way. I don't think they got the story they wanted out of it. I didn't see much fighting. I mostly heard it through the walls while we moved from an area to the next one, through the security EM communications of the fewer and fewer guards that were accompanying us. When I saw something, it was mostly the effects of the fighting. The corpses, the damage to the rooms and hallways that we had to run through, the security feeds showing our men dying, our lifespan coming to an end. I cried every night. I barely slept while we kept moving and tried everything to stay alive and find a way out of the factory and back to Republican space. Jim was in my group, all the time carrying and taking care of Genki, who remained at his side day and night. He was unrecognizable. He was emotionless, silent. He looked cold like the hull that he had a habit to rest against. He looked like a torqued blade, strained in an unnatural pose, waiting to either snap or cut. The old Jim was buried under layers of weird compulsion and routines. He mostly took care of his dog, his gear, and his safety, and left everyone else to himself. The only activity he engaged daily was the construction of weird devices, containers, circuits. Every time we entered a new room or we strolled through a corridor, he would rip stuff off the walls and put it in a huge and heavy bag that he was always carrying on himself, and those strange items would reappear during resting time that we were allotted to be broken down, transformed, reborn into new weird devices. It looked like an innocent coping mechanism to me at the time, something to remain sane and not think about the horrors we were facing, the imminent death that awaited most of us. The third day was the last time I saw old Jim. He woke up, started smiling and joking around, and gave an abundant meal to his dog, using one of his last remaining rations that he had that contained syntho meat. It was so good to see him again. The whole day he was the old self, and that evening we talked so much that at some point we were the only ones left awake. He was sitting against the hull, as usual, and he was gently caressing Genki's head when he started to talk again softly. You know, I was once a soldier, just like the ones that are killing us. He looked me in the eyes, and I felt his soul cold as steel, cutting through me like a sword. I suppose that you don't know how humans fight war, but let me assure you that it's nasty. These soldiers that you people considered the scourge of the galaxy are, well, amateurs compared to the average human militia. I would have flooded this factory with isomethane and carbon monoxide days ago, for example. I didn't know how to respond to such thoughts, so I stood there with my mouth slightly open in disbelief until he went on. I did things in my life that brought me to the brink of self-destruction. Horrible, horrible things. And although the people on the receiving end were no saints themselves, the ease and nature of those acts remains engraved in my soul permanently, bound to it by guilt, shame, and regret. But right when I was ready to give up on life, I found Genki. The dog, resting its head on his thigh, was softly snoring and flinching at his dreaming state. People sometimes only need something to do and some kind of affection to be saved, and a dog can provide both. I am in great debt with this little creature, not only for the unconditional love it gave me in these years, but for providing me a truthful mirror in which to keep my behavior in check, my soul steady, and my demons silent. I had days to think about our situation, and I think I finally got it figured out, but I must ask you a favor. I need you to take care of my dog and treat it with the respect and care that you would reserve for me, for as long as necessary. The pause was abrupt. The speech had been one-sided to the point that I needed some seconds to realize that it was my turn to speak. Well, yes, Jem. I'll do my best. I always liked Genki anyway. But what's in your mind? Don't you think that you should talk with the other security before attempting anything rash? He looked almost serene for a moment, and while getting up and leaving, he handed me a rope tied to his dog's neck. Don't worry, friend. They cannot bear the weight of what I'm about to do. Besides, enough of them died already, and the remaining will help you endure long enough to get out of here alive if I fail. I remember his face leaking water, like that time he had that nasty virus infection and was quarantined to the infirmary. When he was about to exit the room, everyone was still sleeping, and he took his last glance at me and the now restless Genki, before turning away and whispering, Farewell, friend. Please remember me happy. I'm still not sure if those last words were for me or Genki. Time slowed down to a crawl. The dog was constantly pulling the rope, crying his friend's departure. After about 2 days, we started to feel the floor vibrating even harder than during the shutting we felt days prior. Everyone was panicking, as the noise turned into something so loud that it hurt, deafening us to the point of not hearing even the sound of our thoughts. Suddenly, in the same abrupt fashion, the turmoil stopped, and a thin red light appeared all around the doorframe, indicating that the hallway leading to the storage room we were in was exposed to the toxic thin atmosphere of the planetoid we were residing on. Days passed in total silence until we were rescued by Republican forces. More days then flew by while I was hospitalized and recovering while the QNet was in turmoil over the incident, or so it was called by them. The story of it became an anecdote on human resilience and ingenuity. The way Jim fought his last battle went down in history as the cruelest display of engineering prowess, twisted creativity, and pure carnage of the modern era, making the whole galaxy wary of the human ability to weaponize tools and mostly harmless technology. I found out from the QNet updates that were fed to my hospital-bed's terminal that using a homemade gun, some bombs, and guerrilla tactics, he was able to butcher his way into the docking area of the base, commandeer an enemy ship, infiltrate the main bomber ship, and unload every single weapon of the rest of the fleet before deorbiting it right in the proximity of the base, annihilating ground forces employed in the occupation and repairs. It wasn't what he did that shocked the public opinion, but how he did it. He started with some sentinels, scouts, and smaller units, wounding them, making them ask for help in order to kill more. He tortured the medics, broadcasting the agonizing screeching on their comms, left corpses in such a state that the sight of them still haunts the few survivors who had to monitor the combatants' video feeds. He employed chemical warfare, using anything dangerous he came into contact within the days of our failed escape. He did whatever he could to win, including self-immolation during the final attack. The opposing force thought that they were fighting a new breed of infiltrators deployed by the Republican intelligence specifically to fight them. He was speechless, sustained only by stimulants and hatred, fighting non-stop for the whole 56 hours. But the worst thing of it all, he enjoyed himself. He left behind any vestigial conscience he had, stopping only to stalk new prey. Many journalists tried their best at describing Jim: a hero, a savage, a brilliant tactician, an insane individual. In my opinion, Jim was simply a lonely, lost soul who learned to be a predator during his years as a fighter and was able to silence his inner demon long enough to rebuild a life. He died the third last day, when he said his goodbyes to my colleagues, me and his companion. He didn't just give his life, he gave up his very soul, burning it in the crucible of rage, just to have a shot at freeing us, at saving lives. And he was able to do it because of a dog. A dog that even today, half blind and aching for old age, is still waiting for his friend to return. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters: Bushmaster117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.